Hello everyone. I was very pleased to see that so many of you watched the last video. That's absolutely wonderful. And I also had quite an interesting experience because one of your comments were very entertaining, by the way, actually taught me a new expression. Now, someone expressed concern at the fact that in my room I have what this person described as a giant onion. That is, of course, a lamp, for those of you who were wondering. And even more interesting, a K-pop boy hanging behind me. Boy spelled B-O-I. And I had no idea what this meant, so I looked it up. I was vaguely aware that K-pop was a musical genre popular among the younger generations. But what was a boy, I asked myself. It turns out it seems to be an effeminate-looking young man, something like that, if I get it right. Now, this is not a K-pop boy. This is actually a Chinese emperor, and you can even see his wife next to him. I think he's called Kang Xi, something like that, but I probably pronounced that wrong. My experience is I go around thinking that my Chinese pronunciation is excellent, and then I say something to a Chinese person and they can't understand a word. So there you go. Yeah, let's get down to work. I want to do a little bit of grammar with you today. I asked you to look at some stuff about participles and to get you going on that if you haven't done it yet. I'm going to explain some basics to you and we'll do a little exercise together. Good news is none of this is really new. You should have done this last year already, so it shouldn't be too difficult for you. I see it as a bit of getting warmed up or something like that. Okay, let's look at participles, and there are two types of participle in English, present participle and past participle, and the first thing we need to do is to check up on how you form them. So here goes. Don't forget to write this down. This is where you need your pen and your paper and your brain. And as you can see in the top corner, you can read about all this in the book if you want to on page 167. So let's look at the present participles first of all. You've been aware of these since year 5. It's what in German is often referred to as the ing form, which is the infinitive plus ing. And I've just noted down a couple of examples for you there. So play, playing, go, going, and plan, planning, the double N in planning, because plan has a vowel followed by a consonant at the end. Okay, so that's really simple. You should know that very well, for example, from the present progressive tense for describing pictures. And of course, you can pause the video anytime you need to write it down better. So that's the present participle. And then I'll just put this away and show you the past participle. Again, you know this very well. You'll have learned many of these off by heart. In German, it's often referred to as die dritte Form. And for regular verbs, it's the infinitive plus ed. So play, played, try, tried. Careful with try. There you have the consonant followed by a y, and the y becomes ied. And plan, planned, again with the double N. Now there's a huge range of irregular verbs in English, and these are the forms that you just have to learn off by heart. So go is gone, be, been, see, seen, and so on. And if you want to have a look at that list to refresh your memory, then feel free to do so. It's on page 240, 241 in your book. So again, I'll just hold that up for a second, and then we'll take a look at one of the many things that you can do with these participles in English. So here goes. Start off with basic rule. So participles can replace relative clauses. I'm trying to peek around that so I can read it to you. Participles can replace relative clauses. The present participle replaces active relative clauses, and the past participle replaces passive relative clauses. I'll show you using a couple of examples what exactly I mean by that. But first of all, write down the rule. So the first thing is present participle replaces active relative clauses. Let's look at an active relative clause. The K-pop boy who is sitting there is actually the emperor. He'd probably have you executed if you called him a K-pop boy, wouldn't he? Rightly so. So there's your relative clause, who is sitting there, and you can quite simply replace that relative clause with a present participle. So then you get the K-pop boy sitting there is actually the emperor. Okay, so let's move on to the past participles. For passive relative clauses. And oh dear, I'm sure you've noticed the mistake immediately, but I'm not going to re-record the whole thing because of it. Bonus points to those who spot the mistake. I've written present participle, but that of course should be past participle. Sorry. Okay, so let's start with the relative clause, which this time is a passive relative clause. Giant onions which were hung up by weirdos should be taken down. Die aufgehängt wurden. What kind of person hangs giant onions in their room? So here the relative clause is which were hung up, a passive relative clause, and so you don't replace it with the present participle, you replace it with a past participle. This, where is it? Here. This is a disgrace. Past participle it should be. Giant onions hung up by weirdos should be taken down. Okay, so when you've got all that, I've got a little exercise for you. It's nice and easy. Pause this if you need to, and then I'll move on. So here is the exercise. So for numbers 1, 2, and 3, all you need to do is just replace the relative clause that you've got there with a participle, either present participle or past participle, depending. And for number 4, 5, and 6, it's a tiny bit more difficult here. You've got two separate sentences and you need to link them with either a present or a past participle. So this is where you need to pause. And when you restart, I'll give you the solutions. Okay, here goes. Here are the answers. So number 1 was videos that are filmed at home are always very interesting. That quite simply becomes videos filmed at home are always very interesting. The girls who are playing the violin are very talented becomes the girls playing the violin are very talented. The book that was written by Hemingway was boring becomes the book written by Hemingway was boring. Then in number 4, you had to link the two sentences. That man is listening to K-pop. He has purple hair. I don't know why I wrote that. I kind of imagined people with purple hair listening to K-pop. Isn't there a band called Blackpink or something? That's almost purple. So that man is listening to K-pop. He has purple hair. Becomes the man listening to K-pop has purple hair. On the ferry, we met a strange man. He was carrying a giant onion. On the ferry we met a strange man carrying a giant onion. And finally, look at the onion. It was grown by a giant. That's why it's so big. And that becomes, look at the onion grown by a giant. Okay, I hope you found that a little bit interesting, not too difficult. Do keep your comments going. I found them very entertaining indeed. But now it's goodbye from me. It's goodbye from the Emperor and the Empress. Don't diss him. He's the man. See you. Bye.